So I just hopped on in the middle of the night to do this video because I guess in the middle of the night woke up thinking it was early in the morning and it was only like 1:30 and I was like, whoa, that's weird. Looked at my phone just to do a random news check, and I came across this news story that blows my mind and really is being unreported by the media. But it very well could be the Fort Sumter of the next American Civil War. Last night in Texas, there was a man who did not look sober and not alcohol. He looked like he was on meth. Was interviewed on the news, and he was carrying an AK-47, and he was being asked about why he's carrying the AK-47, and he also decided to add that I won't brandish this at any police officers because that's a bad idea, but here the general public is too pussy to do anything. Let me remind you, he wasn't in California saying this, he was in Texas saying this. So what do you think happened to this gentleman tonight?
Oh, it's AK-47.
What you got it out tonight?
They don't let us march in the streets anymore, so gotta practice some of our rights.
Cool, man. Do you feel like you'll need to use it?
Nah, I think if I use it against the cops, I'm dead. And I think all the people that hate us and, want to say shit to us are too big of pussies to stop and actually do anything about it. So,
why'd you start carrying?
Well, our roommate got arrested and they stopped letting us march anywhere, so started carrying.
He decided to brandish his AK at a car while the violent protesters were attacking it, and he was soon dispatched. The man with the AK lost the firefight. The driver opened fire, and the protesters, like the cowards they are, quickly ran away. The driver, after escaping the situation, called the police, and the police, wisely are not exposing the identity of this driver, but it's getting real, folks. Guy who is waving an AK-47 at people is shot, and of course this happened in the middle of the night, so you might be hearing a lot of news stories out there at some time in the early morning cycle. Protester shot by gun-wielding driver or something like that, or gun-wielding driver guns down protester. Well, if you've heard it from me here first, the terrorists have becoming more and more bold and have done more and more violent actions. I mean, of course, you've probably been hearing about the riots for the past 60 days, but there are three very notable events that happened prior to this one, which absolutely can be defined as terrorism. First, man on a flight in Alaska Airlines a few weeks ago gets up and out of his seat, marches up and down the aisles, and demands that everyone on the flight admit that Jesus was black, otherwise he's taking down the plane. This man was apprehended by his fellow passengers, and the flight was rerouted back to its original airport, which it came from, which was Seattle, and the passenger was taken to authorities, and authorities had only charged him with harassment. That's how cowardly some of these cities are handling their terrorists. Seattle, without surprise, charges this man who threatened to take down an entire plane with harassment. Absurd. Next instance that happened is in Florida. During a church service, car drives into the church building. Driver gets out and tries to set his car on fire. Authorities, of course, arrest him, and he is now being charged with arson and attempted murder is great. But, of course, you don't hear about it in the mainstream media news cycle, because the narrative is all of these protesters are peaceful, and anyone doing any sort of action in the name of Black Lives Matter or any sort of leftist ideal can never be an extremist, no matter how far they go. Lastly, of course, the federal troops and Trump have been getting a lot of flack in Portland, but what a lot of people don't realize is these violent protesters have gone to very violent means. We've been seeing them throw Molotov cocktails and bottles and stuff at each other and at the Portland mayor. But what a lot of people don't realize is only a couple days prior to when the news really started coming out of the federal agents starting to actually crack down on these protesters, is these quote-unquote protesters, is these terrorists locked these federal agents, or tried to lock these federal agents, into the federal building and tried to light it on fire. And there had to have been a couple dozen of these federal agents. So, yes, again, this could be the Fort Sumter of the Second American Civil War. The first driver to open fire on protesters. Rightfully so, because there was an AK-47 wielding terrorist pointing his gun at his car. But there are other instances. A couple days ago in Portland, there was an Antifa member, at least dressed like an Antifa, he wore a black helmet and all black, who had a Mexican standoff. Well, not Mexican because there's only two of them, but a standoff with the driver. The driver removed or pulled out his gun, and the Antifa member, or at least appeared to be an Antifa member, also had a gun. And the Antifa member had his hands through the windshield of the driver. So who's in the wrong here? The driver who's protecting himself, or the Antifa member who put his hands into the windshield of the driver? Telling you folks, this is it. Civil War has started. If you don't have guns yet, get them now. Protect yourself, protect your family, be smart, and think about what's going on right now for this next election. Anyways, that's it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next one.